All right, welcome back. We are COMP123, that's Programming 2 in the summer 2020 semester at Centennial, and it's week 8, part 1 of our broadcast, and we're talking about how to use UI objects in the Visual Studio IDE. But before we get to that, let's get to this. So here's our schedule for this week. I've included the posted schedule. This is the posted schedule. We're supposed to start object-oriented programming this week, but you guys are way ahead. You've done object-oriented programming already, and what we're doing is actually down here in week 10. So we're a couple weeks ahead, which is good, which is where I want you guys to be. We'll include things that we haven't talked about starting this week. For example, we haven't talked about test-driven development, and we haven't really talked about up here partial classes down in here. Which is something we're going to be talking about today, actually. So that's what we're going to go going with. So this is where we're supposed to be. This week we have test 1 that will be released, and I'll talk about that in a second. So that's what's going to happen starting on Wednesday. I'm going to release it on Wednesday, and you'll have until Friday to get it done. You'll have unlimited, chances to respond to the test, and I recommend you don't wait until Friday night near midnight to get it done. It'll be something that you have been doing before, so it's not like you won't be familiar with what I'm going to ask you to do, because more or less it's the same stuff that I've asked you to do for assignment that I've just given you. So I've given you an assignment, I've given you kind of inheritance and polymorphism, and you'll get more of inheritance and polymorphism with your tests. Right? So that's what's going to come. It's coming, and I'm going to release it Wednesday. You'll have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday to get it done. Of course, it'll be open book, open internet. It'll be practical, so you have to code, right? So it won't be a true, false, multiple choice theory test. I'm not really a strong believer in those kind of things. And you will be required to create a short video. So, and GitHub, of course, will also be required. So why? Because, again, from an academic integrity this semester, I think it's really super important for you guys to explain stuff and go through the material. I think it's better for your understanding. I think overall you're going to come out stronger for it. Okay, so again, look for that. We're going to be talking about it on Wednesday. Okay, so you'll have and again, it won't take. I'm not going to make it so that it's going to take hours to do. It's going to be like an in-week assignment. It'll kind of reinforce the stuff that we've talked about with inheritance and polymorphism. Okay, that's all it's going to do. Don't expect it to be super, in any way, but it's coming. Okay, so just letting you know. Okay, so that is this week's activities. So what we're going to be talking about today and then on Wednesday is UI, and we're going to use Windows Forms to do it. Okay, there's different ways of doing it. We can use the Windows has come up with, or Microsoft has come up with a bunch of different ways, but I think Windows Forms is a great way to learn how to use UI, and it's still used today in very many enterprise companies. They still use Windows Forms, not WPF. Definitely not any of the other windowing kind of paradigms that they've come up with lately as much. They have them, it's there, but it's not as popular still as Windows Forms because Windows Forms are so simple to create. Okay, so which is funny because Windows Forms has been around for, I don't know, probably almost 20 years, right? So it's kind of a long time that they've been out. As long as Windows has been out, Windows Forms has been out, right? So that's a long time. Okay, so let's get to this now. So we're going to create a form in Visual Studio and all this kind of stuff, and the way to do that, and we'll talk about what forms are, is let's go back to Visual Studio 2019, right? So we're going to start this, and we're going to make a new project in Visual Studio. Normally we start with console on the right, and what I want you to do is I want you to choose desktop this time. Okay, so this is the first time we're making a desktop app, right, for Visual Studio. Notice there's different options. For example, a WPF, Windows Presentation Foundation. There's also a blank app, Universal Windows. So UWP is another way of doing it. UWP is great for other things, and maybe if we have a chance later on, for example, they also make Xbox games with UWP and a bunch of other stuff. If we have a chance to hit WP at some point this semester, we will. I don't think so though, only because this is difficult enough, the stuff that I'm going to give you to do. So so you can see there's lots and lots of stuff you can do here. What we're looking for is Windows Forms app. Windows Forms app. So please click there. So it's not an unit test, it's this one, Windows Forms app. Okay? I'm going to wait till you guys get there with me. Again, it's in C#, all platforms, desktop, and then Windows Form app. Then click next. Okay, we're going to code it the same way we normally code it. So it's COMP123, and it's the summer 2020 semester, and it's lesson 8, part 1. Okay, if we can do part 2, we will. If not, we'll continue with part 1. Again, I'm using a framework 4.7.2, .NET framework. You might be something like that, more advanced. Because of this recording, this is the latest that I can get a hold of. Click create. And this is going to create a different kind of application. All right, so it's not going to be what you've been used to all this time. So up until now, last semester, and all the way up to this semester, you've been making console applications. This is not going to be a console application. This is going to look very different, like this. And the question I have for you is, are you with me? Check mark for yes, X for no, please. Are you with me? I got some check marks, a couple of check marks, and I've got a bunch of blanks. People who aren't answering at all. Okay, I know my internet's kind of flaky today too, so it's going to even make it nicer today. Wonderful. All right, so we got more check marks. We got more check marks. Hopefully you're going to be with me on this. You need to do this with me, guys. This is not something you guys can just watch. Thank you. I see you, Gurkadat. Okay, let's clear all these and let's move on. Okay, so we have this form. One thing that you're going to be trying to do is move it. You're going to try and like grab this and drag it, and you can't, because this is not that kind of form. It's not like a dialog box you can drag around. Okay, Windows Forms doesn't do that kind of stuff. Okay, let's bring up the Solution Explorer and go through the anatomy of Windows Forms really quickly. Again, this is all covered in the PowerPoints. On the right, you're going to see that there is a program.cs file. Don't touch that right now. The one thing you want to touch is this one, Form 1. Okay, Form 1 by default is the name of the first form that's inside of your application. Okay, so a form is like a dialog box. It can also be the part of the application that we're going to see. Okay, so visual kind of a part of the application. There are different pieces to the UI framework that we're working with. Okay, that that you don't see right now, and we're going to talk about that. Okay. So the first thing we want to do is rename our form. So whenever we start with a new Windows form, we're going to rename this thing. So instead of form1.cs, we're going to right-click here, all right, and we're going to rename. Please do that with me. Right-click and rename the form, and we're going to call this Hello World. Hello World.cs. Okay. And it says, you are renaming a file. Would you like to perform a rename in this project of all references to the code element form 1? Guys, you want to click yes, always. If you click no, bad things will happen. Please click yes. Nothing that you can't get out of, but it's just a whole bunch of extra pain for no reason. Okay. All right, so now you have a Hello World form. Okay, that's what you have. And there's different parts of the screen here. So this part right here, the part in the middle that you're seeing, this is different than you've ever seen, right? This is the design view. Okay, design. Notice on the top left corner it says Hello World for Hello World.cs design. Typically when we say Hello World.cs, okay, this is incomplete. Let's rename it one more time. Right click, rename, and let's call this hello world form.cs. Okay, so we know it's a form, and we're going to say yes again. We can rename it like this as many times as you want. But notice on the top left corner, there's a couple of things for each of these forms. One, you have this part right here, this minimize, this something like a maximize, and a close, an X. That exists on all of our Windows features. Okay, that's number one. You're going to see this. Next is on the left. On the left is a little icon, right, for the application. That's the application icon that appears here. There is the title bar, which is right here, and there's a border that's around here. This is part of the form. And inside here, this is the form workspace, this right here inside here. Okay, so this part is different than this, the borders, the control box, but this is the entire form itself. Okay, so that's part of it. All right, what I want to do now is just let's run this thing. So I'm going to click Start, and just let's run this form and see what we get. So if everything goes well, and if you've downloaded, if you've started your Windows form, and we start running it, you can see that we get this Windows form that looks like any other application right now. By default, you can see that it is scalable, so I can change the size, and I can see that my control handles on my cursor change. So if I move to the right of the form, you can see that automatically they change from a pointer to kind of left-right arrow. And if I go to the bottom, it changes from a pointer to up-down arrow. If I go to the corner, it changes to a pointer and a diagonal arrow. Okay, these things are good. If I hover over the buttons, you can see that I can do things with them. If I click this button, it works like you would expect. Same thing with this one and this one. This will close the form and close the application. So if I click this X button, the form closes, and so too does the application. Okay, so that's one thing that you notice. Okay, so pretty straightforward. You've run your first form. Now that we've done this, let's put this up on GitHub. This is a great time to do this. So again, just like before, I'm just going to click Add to Source Control. Okay, now you can do it here, or where I want to do it is up here in my solution. So right click on my solution, go Add, right? Sorry, Add Solution to Source Control. And what this is going to do is going to do git add dot git commit -m, all those things that I talked about before. And you're going to notice these little blue marks that come up if you've configured your project properly. Okay, we're going to do all GitHub right through Visual Studio, just like I mentioned last week. All right, cool. Let's put this up on GitHub. So Team Explorer, just like before. I'm going to go to Home. I'm going to go to Sync. It's going to take me here. Now, by this time, I'm assuming that you've already got the extension for GitHub. If you don't have it, please watch the videos from last week. Click Publish to GitHub. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my account, which is Centennial. It's going to choose a name for me, COMP123 M2020 Lesson 8 Part 1, which I'm going to accept. I'm going to click Publish. So now you can follow me on GitHub. But just to be clear about how this works, I'm going to go up on GitHub myself. So I'm going to go to GitHub and Centennial. You're going to see my repository right here. This is the new one I just made, right? I want to use this one, copy it, and I'm going to go from here to our eCentennial. And notice on eCentennial I have a couple of PowerPoints and today's video connection. Right, so you can actually watch this live, and for someone who needs usability support and so on, you can use this one. For non-English speakers, I think it's great. It's not perfect, but it's better. I'm going to go New. I'm going to go create a link, and then here populate that link. So this will be the GitHub link for week 8. I'll say part 1. We don't know, maybe we'll have a part 2. Let's see how that goes. Open as an external resource. You should be able to get there now and go to the GitHub link. Now this is important because I'm going to cover stuff in this lesson that you may want to take a look and compare your code with my code. So that's why I'm posting this link, especially right now. Okay, so this is where we're going to start. All right, so we've got our pretty ugly form here. It doesn't do much. But let's go into a couple of things here. So on the Solution Explorer, if I click on the form anywhere once, right, nothing seems to happen. But on the left-hand side, there's a couple things that you want to have kind of embedded. One of them is this toolbox. And you can go View, and what you want to do here is down kind of in the middle, there's a place that says Toolbox. Please click this. If it's not visible here already, or if it's already visible, I've just made mine collapse. You want to go to Toolbox. So again, View, Toolbox. And what this does is it brings up the toolbox like this. Okay, let's pin this one for now. So this toolbox is a place where you can get all kinds of controls that we're going to use. Okay, today we're going to keep it simple. Also on the right, one thing we're missing is properties. So let's pull up our properties. So I'm going to go View, and just like we had our toolbox, right? So you know, you have a bunch of different things here. So notice when we came down, we had our toolbox. What we want is the properties window. Okay, this one right here, properties, which is going to embed itself by default down here. You can always tear it off and do what you have to do, but for me, I'm going to keep it down here. Notice it is case sensitive, so if I click away and click back right now, it doesn't do anything, but eventually it will. What the properties windows does, and again, you can get just one more time, View, properties window. It looks like a little wrench. Okay. What the properties window does is it allows you to change all the properties of the form itself, which is where we're going to start. Notice the name of the form, Hello World Form. This is important. This name in parentheses signifies the variable name or the class name of the form. That's what this does. So please do not change that here. Okay. If you scroll down, you can see that the form itself has a terrible amount of properties, like a huge amount. One of them, notice, is this control box. If I scroll down, you can see that the control box is here, control box. This is this part right here, these three controls. If I change this from true to false, no more control box. You can hide the control box. So this is a lot of control. Let's put this back to true. Okay, so control box on. But one of the first things that I want you guys to notice is where the form gets populated at the beginning. So by default, if I run this thing again, it's going to create the form in a random spot, like on the top, kind of in the middle, but to the left of the screen up here, right? What I want for you guys in this semester is let's center our form. So when it pops up, it comes in the center of our screen. And to do that, if you're going to scroll all the way down, right, notice where it says, you can see that there's a start position property. Again, these are all properties that are accessible for this form, configurable through the property window. All right, so if I click on the start position, you can see that I have an option of a pull-down menu. There's a pull-down menu. I can choose center screen. Okay, center screen now, if I press play, right, then what ends up happening is my form comes into the center of my screen right here, so I don't have to do anything about it. Okay, so please, when we make our forms, try and remember to put the start position as center screen so we have everything. We can size our forms by default. I can choose the default starting size of the form. For example, I can do something like this. I can say that my form, I'm just eyeballing it here, my form is going to be something like this. Okay, and you're going to be like, wait, you just move the handles? Yeah, you can move the control handles to resize the form the way you want. This is the default size. So if I click start here again, you can see that when I start this off, it's going to be the new size that is specified. Okay, but this isn't very scientific, and a lot of times we want to be very specific. So if you go to the size property, you can see here that there's a little, it's collapsed. If you expand it, you can specify width and height, or you can just type it here. So you can say something like, I want my form to be 640 by 480, right? And press enter, and then bam, it's 640 by 480 exactly. All right, so that's kind of a better way to do it than eyeball it. Eyeballing a form is not always the best idea because you're not going to get the exact amount. Sometimes we have to change the size as an example because we have to include other controls we're going to have in here and so on, but kind of this is one of the ways that we would do it. You can also, instead of disabling the entire control box, this is the entire control box, minimize, maximize, and close, you can specify whether you have some controls that are available or not. So for example, I don't want to have the maximize control available. So maximize box, I can shift this to false. And now it's grayed out, right? So if I start it again, you can see that I can't maximize anymore. It's not available to me to maximize, but I can minimize, right? And I can close, no problem. But maximize, not available. So you can turn, kind of control parts of the form on and off. A lot of times we don't want to maximize our form. Maximize box is there if, for example, you have some additional details in the form that you want to show that you're hiding. Okay, that's your maximize box. Or if you can dynamically resize the form data so that you can show more information in a nicer way. Okay, that's good use of the maximize box. For the most part, we're going to keep this false. Okay, just letting you know. The other thing that we don't want a lot of times is to resize. So we want to stop the form from having a resizable property. And to do that, if you go up and if you scroll down, if you start scrolling down from the top, so notice that there's something called a form border style. Form border style. So there's a maximize box, and now we're going up a little bit to form border style. If you click on there, you have a pull down menu, and you can choose different things. Okay, one of them is sizable, which is what this thing is. The other one is fixed single. If I click fixed single, you're going to see now that it looks the same. But when I run this form, right, for the first time, now the form will not be sizable. So I can't kind of go over here on the side. My cursor doesn't change, from a pointer to a left and right arrow, up and down arrow, or diagonal arrow. It doesn't do that anymore, right? Why? I've changed the border type to fixed single. Now, a lot of times in this course, we're going to use the fixed single border style. And the reason for this is because I don't want you to resize your forms very often. It's the same reason why we wouldn't want to maximize, typically. Okay, so I've just shown you a couple of controls. We're going to get into more controls throughout the semester, the last part of the semester anyway. But this is the first part of a form. The other thing that I want to change is the title. So if I go down to text, every control has a text property for the most part. Well, most controls anyway. So if you go text, it says form 1. You can change this. This is going to be the title bar text on the top left corner. And you can change this text to say whatever you want. For example, hello world. Right? And if you did that, change it, you can see now that the top left corner of the form is changed to hello world. If I start it, it's also going to have it on the title bar of the form. Okay, so it's going to say hello world right here. Okay. Are you with me? Check mark for yes, X for no, please. I want to know that you guys are following along nicely because I'm going to go much quicker than this. And I don't want to lose you guys. So it's important that I know that you can do some simple things like this. And this is truly simple. It's not a lot. Thank you for that. I'll reset you guys. Okay, so now this is good. So we've got some simple stuff here. And what I want to do now, and the first thing that we always learn whenever we program UI, is on the left, there's this toolbox, like I talked about. I want you to go to where it says Common Controls and expand this part. You can see that there's a lot of different controls here, okay? What I want you to do is grab a label control and drag and drop it onto the form. Okay, so there's label 1. You can see you can put it anywhere you want on the form, okay? So it doesn't really help you to put it where you want, it just anywhere you want, okay? Notice now on the right side where we have the properties window, it's actually focused on label 1. If I click on the form, it's the form that I'm looking at. But if I look at the label, if I click on the label once, then it's the label that I'm looking at. This is context sensitive. So the context of the form, the context of the label, whatever I'm clicking on. Okay. So if I go to the label now, the name of the label, this is important, this name of the label is the variable name of what this is going to be called in code. Okay, so it's important we name this correctly. Label 1 is insufficient. If I see you call your form 1, or if I see you call your controls label 1, that would be very bad. All right, you're going to lose marks for that going forward. So please make sure you name your labels what they're supposed to be. For example, the welcome label. Let's call that a welcome label. Okay, notice I put the keyword label after the word welcome. Welcome label. Okay, why? Because just like I put hello world form, I know it's a form. I know this is a label just by looking at it. Okay, the name of the variable I'm talking about. So that is the variable name. Okay, if I scroll down, just like the other, like the form, a label has a text property, and you can change the text property to whatever you want. For example, I could say something like hello world. Okay, it's not very exciting, but you can see that hello world right now on the form itself, right? It's kind of somewhere in the middle, not quite in the middle, right? And the size of my object, if I say I want my label to be something like 100, it doesn't really change. Okay, notice how it doesn't change. The label is going to change size according to the text that's inside of it by default. By default. You can change that, but by default that's what it does. You can't really modify the size manually here like we did before. Okay. Text alignment properties for the label, as an example, are top left by default, but you can also change that. So if I want to make my text align to the center, I can do that. You won't notice a difference anymore right now because our form is the same size. Let's put it back to top left. Okay. If I scroll up, you can see that auto size is true. If you change the auto size property to false, now you've got control handles, okay, which is what we want. The form now, or the label, can be as big or as small as I want it to be. And this is where we want. We want the auto size feature for labels to be false by default, okay, because this way we have control. Sometimes we want to make them true to size, and then we want to change them back to false afterwards. The background color, that's the background color of the label. So if I change the background color of the label to something else, let's say for example, I don't know, this active caption thing, it'll change the background color of the label, not the foreground color of the label. The foreground color of the label can change with forecolor. And by the way, it's the same for the form itself. So we can change the forecolor label, let's say to something like white. I like white. You can make it so that the label itself has white, and then this is the background for the label. This is just a label. Think about it as a text box right now. That's what it is. But it's not. It's a label. Okay. We can also change the font by default. So the font of the entire label can be changed. Right now the default size is like 8 points. That's really super small. All right. Let's make this something a lot larger. You can actually type it in here. I can say something like 20 points. So you can see that that is more reasonable for our form. Now, notice the control handles are the way they are. What I could do, if I want this exactly centered on my screen without any kind of calculations, is I could drag it all the way to the right, and I can drag this all the way to the left so I can see the form. Okay, you can see I can see the label, right? I'm going to recenter this, and I'm going to change the back color. I made it back color like this so you can see it, but I can change the back color back to what it was before, which was system. Right, so the window or the by default. If you go to system and if you go to control, that's what the default label is, right? You can't see it. And I can change the fore color if I want to. Again, just fooling around. I'm going to change this back as an example to control. All right, so if I change it to control, you can see that it's completely invisible now, right? Control is like a color scheme that we can use. Active caption text is okay. That's kind of a black color. And if you want to, you can go with custom colors. You can choose any one of these, as well as make your own. Okay, you can choose web safe colors, so colors that are on the web. Make your own custom color. As an example, you can choose black as a 4 color, right? One of these colors, or you can choose a system color. Okay, active caption text. And notice if I drag another label in here, so let's say I drag another label in here, whatever the previous label's styling is what happens with this thing. So be careful when you create labels and stuff, what it does. So just giving you a heads up here. So this is the thing. So the label is this wide. It's not auto sizing, but we want this hello world to be centered. Well, that's pretty simple now, because all I have to go to is text align, and instead of being top left, I can make it center. That's exactly centered according to my form. Notice I'm not taking my controls and putting them right to the edge. There's a kind of a bit of a buffer here, and it snaps to this part. Look, see, it snaps right to the edge, snaps. This is kind of a default margin that it gives you, right? If I want to now, I can move this up like this, so you can see that the form itself, the label itself, is the size of my form, but you can only see, when I click away, you can only see the actual words. You can't see the the border, because we haven't enabled something like that. Okay. If I also want to, if I want it completely centered, right, I can do the same thing. I can make that the label takes up the entire form if I want. Okay, and then I can just go to text align again, and I can choose that it's going to be center over here. So middle center, and that is the exact middle of the form inside of this gray area right here, not including the title or the borders. Okay, so it looks like it's a little low, but only because of that this is here. Okay. Now, if I was to take this, and if I was to go back to my auto size value, so auto size, and change this back to true, right? You can see that automatically it's going to put my label way at the corner up here. That would not be a good result. Okay, so we don't want that. Undo. Control Z to undo again, or Z. But again, what you could do, right, is with this form itself, right, you can see that this is a way, if you really want to have this label exactly in the middle, if you really want to, or the text for the label. Anyway, the label itself takes up the entire form. That's the container itself. The container of the label takes up the entire form, but the text of the label is exactly centered, right, based on our text align. All right, let's do it manually. What if, instead of doing this, I had a form that was like this, and I wanted it to be in the middle? How would I do something like that? Well, and we're going to do centering of controls more as we go forward, but I want to make this centered. Now, as an example, notice that there are no tools up here that are active that can help you by default. Okay, so it's not like you can click on a tool and it's going to center it for me, right? So again, if I go to align, all these things, not good. Spacing, vertical, it says vertical center in form is the one you want. Center in form, you can say, I want to center it horizontally. Okay, so I'm going to, again, if you notice, I'm going to format, center in form vertically. Okay, so that exactly centers it inside the form. And the one thing to note here is, if I scroll down, it tells you the exact position of the form. So you see where it says location, 223, 197. That's an X and Y coordinate. Hey, that looks like a vector that we've been creating all this time. 223 and 197. It gives us the exact location of our form, of our label. I can move this around wherever I want. I can move it numerically here, or just like I did with the resizing of the entire form, type in both values. Let's say, for example, I want the X location to be 300. I can move that to 300 and it'll move here. By the way, 300 is the top left corner of the object. Okay, by default, all controls and Windows forms are the anchor point is the top left corner of the control. This is an important thing to note, right? Because this is where it starts. top left corner, 300, right? And because our form itself is 640 by 480, if I put this at 640, let's see what happens. You can see that it's outside of our form. It's quite outside. This is 640 right here. See, but notice the top left corner is close to the edge because that's what 640 is for this form. Okay, 640 pixels. So we can put this back. All right, so again, let's put it at 300. Where you can see that's kind of in the middle. And if I was to go back to format, so again, click on this, and I'm going to go to format, center and form. If I click it once, nothing happens, but if I go to horizontally, then it moves it back to that number, 223. Okay. So that's how you do it like this with the format menu. Unfortunately, one thing I would have liked is if the format menu had a quick key or something, center and form, and I can just click a key to have that happen. There is no quick way of doing that. Okay, cool. So that's nice. But what if I wanted to do this myself? How could I do it if I didn't want to use this, and if I wanted to kind of calculate how I could do it? How could I go about it? Well, there's a couple things to the way to help me to figure this out. One is I know that my size of my object is 178 width and 47 height. 47, that's an odd height, right? But let's suppose that this is the case. And if I know that my form size is 640 by 480, okay? With a padding of 000, this is important to kind of look at, right? Padding of 000, and margins are all 000. So there's nothing, I'm not increasing the margins or padding by anything else. If you've done JavaScript, these things would count. For us, it does not count right now because nothing has been padded or anything. So we know that it's 640 by 480, and if I want to center it from a horizontal perspective, I take 640, I subtract the form controls width. So let's do that. So here's my calculator. Okay, so you can see that it's down here. So my form width is 640 pixels or points. You want to subtract 178 from it, 178, right? What gives you 462, and divide that by 2, right? And now you have 231, which is kind of where it should be from a raw calculation perspective. So if I was to change this number to 231, it's going to be roughly off because the object itself has margins inside, 0, 3, 3. You can see that inside the object, the object itself has margins, right? 3, 3, left is 3, right is 3, right? If I took those margins away, then it would change the inside, the way it looks inside. But anyways, let's leave it as is and just change the numbers like it says. So if I change this to 231, that's looking still okay, right? And then on the y-axis, so again, if you see 47 on the y-axis, that's the height. You do the same game. You'd say, okay, fine. I'm going to take my form height, which is 480, minus 47, gives you 433. Divide that by 2, and you can see that we calculate it should be something like 216.5. Okay, so if I was to go here and change this location to 216, still it's okay. The reason why it appears a little lower again is because where this point is on the top left corner. This is the anchor point is the top left corner, right? So again, some padding and just a little bit of adjustment, but more or less this is in the center of the screen. And there are some adjustments because of padding and some other things. But more or less, that's pretty good. That's how you would figure it approximately where it's going to be. And then let's say you said to yourself, well, it doesn't look right from a user experience perspective. Maybe it should be a little bit higher, but you can always nudge it, right? So if I was to use my arrow keys while it's selected, arrow can nudge it up and down, right? So I can arrow, up arrow. Doesn't change the X and Y coordinates, but it does change, sorry, the Y coordinate, but it does change the X coordinates. So you can kind of eyeball it now. You can say, well, that kind of looks a little better. That kind of looks a little bit more centered on the form, something like that, right? Again, this is including the title bar. It looks a little better. Even though it's not exactly where it's centered, we figured out that by eye, it looks better around 190, okay? And that's pretty good. Okay, so just to kind of talk about how to move things around on the screen. Let's run this thing and see how it looks in real life. One thing is to test it here in our designer, and another thing is to actually run this thing and make it work here. And does it look the same? Notice that there are some differences. How this looks, the text, you know, the spacing and everything else is not exactly what you see is what you get. WYSIWYG. It's not exactly that way. In fact, this looks a little bigger than this, just a little bit. But it's pretty good. If you actually put these next to each other, you can see that the border has disappeared. So there is no border, right? And if I put this thing here on top of the other thing, there are some differences. Notice that the form itself lost all of its borders because now we're in Windows 10. Remember, Windows Form has been around for a long, long time, so that is something that's changed in terms of what you see is what you get. May not be the same. And also, depending on your settings, your Windows settings and so on, this also may be different. Why? If you're zooming in or if you're doing anything weird on your display settings. So if I go back to my display settings here, right-click, and if I go to display settings, you can make adjustments to Windows 10, right? Notice I have 3 screens. You can make adjustments to Windows 10 to adjust how this looks, right? Like you can change the scale and so on. Notice my scale is 100%. If I was to change the scale to something else, then this would change what this looks like. So yours might look different to me if you're doing something else in here, okay? I'm at 1920 by 1080, so that way you guys can see what my screen looks like, and it's not like too scaled low, and so on. So I'm okay. I'm kind of in the middle from a scaling perspective. But if you change this to something weird, like 125, 150% or something else, then you would have a different view than me. Okay, so that's something to note. Okay, back to this. So that's fantastic. We're able to make a control come out. You know, and I want to try one more control. Button. So we have our label, we have our button. Let's drag a button now into the screen. Here we go. Here's our button. Notice that the button retains some of the configurations that I had put in earlier. We can change this. Just like before, the first thing we want to do for our button is we want to change it so that it has a name that's proper. Button 1 is incorrect. It doesn't mean anything for us. We want to change this. So I want to make this the click me button. So when I click it, it does something. So let's make this the click me button. Click me button. Okay, click me button. Yay. That's the name. Remember the name in parentheses on the top. By the way, if you see a different organization for things, like there's a little categorized option here as well. So categorized actually talks about, it just groups controls in different categories, like location, margins, and a bunch of other stuff, sizes, padding, and design, right? There's also alphabetical, which is what I like. So please, let's use alphabetical when it comes to how we can find stuff. This little button right here. There's some little buttons in here in the properties menu. Okay. Cool. So that's good. And I want to change the back color of my button. Let's make it blue. Again, some kind of like active caption or something like that. Was fine. You can also make it, if you don't like that blue and you want to make it like another blue, like a highlight, is fine too. Let's make the button a little bigger. All right, and I want to make it so that it's the same point size as the label. Let's make our points, instead of something like 8 points, let's make it something like 20 points. Okay. Now notice the button can actually be whatever size you want. There is no auto sizing feature turned on by default for the button, although I could turn it on. So if I go here to auto size and make this true, then the button will actually size and you know, to whatever size that's inside of here, right? By default. Okay. And notice I cannot go lower than this. I can't go higher, but I can't go lower than the text that's in the button if my auto size feature is true. Okay, which is actually not a bad idea, right? You don't want to be able to shrink lower than the button size, right? Okay, I don't want it to say button. I want it to say click me. So I'm going to go back down to where it says the text field, the text property, and change the text property of the button to click space me exclamation mark. So now you can see that the button has resized itself to kind of house the minimum amount in, you know, that it's holding, right? Just like before, I want to center this thing, and a couple ways to do this. But notice now that there's another little control handle that comes up. Why? Because I have two controls. I have a UI label, right, which is label, and I have a button. So if I go to the left, you can see that there's a little control handle that comes up that kind of aligns it to the left. There's another little control handle that kind of aligns it to the right of my label. But there's no control handle unfortunately, that comes to kind of center it, right? However, if I was to click both of these, so shift left click, I can select both. Now you can see that these things pop up. These controls up here pop up, which allow me to do things like I can align the rights together or the lefts together, or I want to align centers. It really depends on which one you click. If I click this and then this one, right? And if I click align centers, then the label aligns with the button. Let's undo that change. Control Z. Okay, if I click this one and then this one, now the button will align with the label. See? Which is a kind of a cool way of doing alignment. So just from a format change perspective, you want to do that. Notice that my button likes being dark background, light foreground. We don't ever, from a UI control perspective, and I'm telling you this for now and for forever, I don't want to see black background, black lettering with a dark background. That would, if it's not viewable, you're going to lose marks from a UI perspective. Like a, you know, it's a usability thing, right? You can't see the button, the text, then it doesn't look good, right? You have to be able to see the text like this. Okay, so cool. So I've got a button and a label, and if I run this thing right now, it doesn't do anything. But if I run it, you can see that the button appears where I tell it to appear. So it's kind of where it is. It has some features where it looks like a button. When I hover over it, it changes the shape of the button. There is a bit of a border by default on the button itself. You can see that there's a border on it. And if I hover over and click onto it, it looks like it's a button. The label looks like it's a label, like some kind of words, but the button looks like a button. If I go to the click me button now, again, it has some interesting features. So you can see that there's the border color, if I want to add a border color or not. Right now it does have a border color. I can choose that it has none, right? So if I want to have under the web, I can say transparent. So I don't want a border color. So this property value is not valid because it doesn't like transparent as the border color. If it doesn't work, it'll tell you it doesn't work, right? So so that's one thing. Border colors, look, it says info, menu, text. What we want, of course, is to match with the background. So if we made this something like control, well then the border color would be away. The other thing that you can also do with buttons also take the format of your windows. So whatever you kind of format, it takes like default values, if you will, from the window. So if I click on the button itself, so that's location of the button. Here are the margins, and you can see that this is the size, and this is the tab index. We're going to come back to that. Text align is middle center, so it's kind of done the same thing with Hello World. It's kind of taken that same style, right, and so on. Okay, so pretty good. Okay, now I want to make the button work. So the way to make the button work, to make sure that I can change something that's in the form, is double click the button. Please do not double click the form. Double click the button. When you double click the button, right, and again, it's going to take a second, it's going to bring up your code. All right. So what did I do? I went here and I double-clicked the button. When I double-clicked the button, it brought me to my code. And it created something for me, right? And you're going to say, wait, where is this code you speak of? Where did we teleport to? How did I get here? And it says hello world form.cs, but on the right in the application or the solution window, you can see that there is no hello world.cs that's separate than what we had before. Look, we had a hello world designer, and now suddenly we have this hello world.cs. Where did it come from? Well, if you right click on the form, another way to get to the code is to go to view code, right? That's the way to do it, or press F7. So if I press F7, if I'm here and I right click now, I can view the designer with Shift F7. So I want to see the designer, Shift F7. If I want to see the form, F7 will take me back to that. Shift F7 will shift me back. This is a good way of working. I want you to think about this as the view itself. This is the view, and this is the code behind file. The code behind file. Okay. So the code behind file is connected to the view because they have the same name, hello world form.cs. In fact, hello world form.cs is actually a container that contains a bunch of different other parts. One of them is this thing called hello world form.designer.cs. If you click onto that once, I don't recommend you modifying it, but this is on the back end a way of controlling the user interface programmatically. So instead of me dragging and dropping, I can actually make my user interface by using kind of the API that's built into Windows Forms. Okay. I don't want to do that right now, so please let's not fool around with the designer. Let's just click that X. Okay. What I want to do here is I want to go to what we did. So I went to the hello world form. I double clicked on my click me button. It took me and opened up the code behind file, which is this file right here. And then it made this method for me, which is a click me button. So notice the name of the method starts off with the name of the UI that I clicked, the UI control, right? And then what I'm doing, click, this is the click event. I have in parentheses a couple of arguments. One of them is a sender, which is of type object, and something called E, which is of type event arguments. Okay, so the sender, I'm just going to put this out there to you, is the object that raised the event. Okay, so I want to make it so that when I click on the button, it does something. When I click on a button, my Windows will respond and say, hey, someone clicked on the button. This is the event, the click event that I just raised or triggered. I triggered the click event, and it tells me the event that I trigger right here. This is what I did, right? Okay, fine. I raised the click event, but who raised it? Well, the sender has that information. The sender keeps track of who raised the event. In this case, or which control. In this case, the event was raised by the click me button control. Cool. Yeah, that's how it works. Notice some other things inside of this space. Namespace is the same as we're used to, but there's something called partial class. We haven't seen this before, right? So public class. I told you I would talk about this. Partial. So the partial keyword, what it does is allows us to write our classes in different pieces, right? As opposed to writing it in one long file, we can separate our class into multiple files by using the partial keyword. Okay. However, someplace on our form, that means that when we look at a form, we're actually not seeing the whole class, the whole form class. There's another part of the class that's hidden, which is inside of our hello world form.designer. So if I click on this again, let's double click and open it, you can see that also it says partial class here. Partial class hello world form. Okay. Again, super important not to mess with this file right now. But I wanted to mention to you that there's two. Hello world form, public partial class, and hello world form, partial class. Okay? Notice there's no public keyword here, which means that this part of the form is private. most of it is private. All of the methods are private. Okay? So this part we're not going to mess with. This is the programmatic way of doing things. But I just want you to notice that there's two hello world forms. One that is here and public, and the other one that's inside of Hello World Form Designer that is private by default. It's still called Hello World Form, but notice that Hello World Form here, I don't inherit from anything else. It just says Hello World Form. Whereas here, this Hello World Form gives us our entire signature. Hello World Form inherits from or extends, that's the colon, remember? The form superclass. Form superclass. That's why we've done this thing, right? And the great thing about this is once we have our form in place, right? Notice we also have our constructor function. Our constructor function calls something called initialize component. Initialize component is a private method that is defined inside of Hello World Form Designer in here. Hello World Form Designer, right? So notice that we call the initialize component method, right? Initialize component is a private method. I don't like the way they've done it, but a private method that is inside of the Hello World Form Designer that's being called from the Hello World Form itself. This is the code behind file. Okay, so I'm going to click this, close this. Cool. So we don't need to mess with this right now. The only thing I want to do is I want to change when I click on the button. I want to change the text value, the text property of my label, right? To say that it'll be clicked. That's what I want it to be. So it'll say clicked. Okay. So how do we do this? Well, we know what the variable name is of the label, don't we? It's called welcome label. So if I start typing welcome label, right, and I want to be able to do that, you can see that welcome label comes up. This is why it's important that we name things properly. Welcome label, hey, welcome label. I want you to modify your text value, right? And I want to change the text value to clicked. Okay? You guys are familiar with regular C#. This is saying go to the welcome label object. Take a look at the text property, right? Welcome label is a UI object, is a component, right? That's been defined. The text is the property of the welcome label. And I'm modifying the text property of the welcome label by changing its string value, right? If you hover over this, by the way, it tells you this stuff. Welcome label, it says, is a label, a type label, Hello World Form. It's part of Hello World Form, right? It belongs to Hello World Form, and it's that's the thing. And I'm looking at the text property. It has a getter and setter. Notice if I hover over it, it says get set. Okay, and it's a string value. Cool. If I run this now, I know I'm going slow, guys, but it's going to ramp. Trust me. If I click on this little button here, then all of a sudden, clicked, this label changes, right? I'm going slow because this is where students first become confused, and once they become confused about this, they become confused for the whole course for some reason, right? I think this is the easiest part, but that's me. I've done this a lot of times, but some people are like, wait, what happened? How did it happen? How did it go? Well, remember what's happened here. There's two parts. There's the part in front, the part that we see, the UI portion, which is the design part. We take some controls from the toolbox and drag and drop them in here, right? That's what we did, okay? So we did it by dragging and dropping, okay? The code, when I double clicked on the button, automatically created this method, right? That was empty. And all we did was we added this one-liner right here, one line of code that took care of all that, okay, for us. Welcome label, how the heck did it know that welcome label was here? Well, these two things are connected. This part here is connected to this part here. This is the visual representation of what's inside of the Hello World Form.Designer, which is hidden, right? This part. And just to show you that if I scroll down, look, there is welcome label, and there are all of the configurations. welcome label dot back color. Anytime you see a property that can appear inside of the design view, this view, and you have something that's in the properties menu over here, properties, kind of window. If you have a property that's listed here, chances are, many times, most times, you can programmatically modify the property in code. Okay, that's how we can do it. So example would be, I modified the back color to system.drawing, systemscolors.color control. My font is a new system.drawing.font Microsoft Sans Serif, right, with 20 size, and I'm telling it to be regular style, and the graphic units is a point and a bunch of other information. Okay, so that's how it's done when you want to programmatically create stuff. We don't need to do this right now. That's not required, but you can see that you can literally create whatever you want. And because this is called welcome label, notice that there was never a welcome label defined anywhere. It wasn't like, hey, var welcome label is of type UI label. I never said that, right? All we did was it was done here, right? So welcome label, we use the keyword this, is equal to a new systems.windows.forms.label. And this creates the new context. This allocates memory for this new welcome label. Same thing with the click me button. Okay. I'm just pointing this out because you're going to wonder how this all is wired together, right? And this is what happens. And if it's actually nicely annotated. So here's the welcome label piece. Here's the click me button piece. This is in the Hello World Form Designer, by the way. If you don't know where I'm looking here. Hello World Designer. Okay. And this is the Hello World Forms properties and so on. Okay. And at the bottom, notice at the bottom, this is where the actual label and button have been defined. I'm saying that welcome label is of type system.windows.forms.label, and it's private. And click me button is of type systems.windows.forms.button. This is where they're defined down here. And then I allocate them, or I access them up here. I initialize them in my initialize component. So here they're defined inside the class space. Initialize component initializes them and gives them values, right? And adjusts their properties. That's how it works. Let's close this thing. I don't want to see it for now. And so the great thing is that if you didn't know any of that, all you would care about is, I want to get the label, I want to change the text to clicked. Challenge for you guys. I want to change the text back, right, to welcome, to hello world, if I click it again. So the first time I click it, I want it to say clicked. And when I click it again, it's going to say hello world. And when I click it again, it's going to say clicked again. How do I do that? Anyone have a suggestion on how to do that? Anyone want to post some code in the chat, or something like that? They want to try and show us what they would do differently. If else, you could use an if else. Yeah, you could. Yeah. Let's do it. Let's do an if else. So we could do an if else. Here's the if else. We can say that, okay, if welcome label dot text, right? Well, if that's equal to something like hello world, got to be exact, by the way. If this is the exact text, then what I want to do is, when I want to change the welcome label dot text to clicked, else, undo. I want to change the welcome label dot text to hello world. Back to this, right? So it's got to be spelled the exact same way, by the way, every single time. Okay, so for this, I don't know. I'm going to come back to the suggestions. It's making some suggestions. I'm ignoring them right now, but it's making some suggestions that we can follow, right? And if I was to run this thing now, then you can see that once I click on the button, it changed to clicked. If I click back again, it changed to hello world, and I can keep doing that over and over again forever, right? However, this is not the best use of code for us, right? And if I hover over this, it says convert to expression. This is neat. It does it for us already. So if I go over here, it says convert to question mark : operator, which is the ternary operator. It's a better way of doing it. If I do this, then it becomes one line. And this is a really nice way of doing it. It says that welcome label.text is equal to, if welcome label.text is equal to hello world, and I usually put this in brackets, by the way, to make it look like a conditional statement, right? If it's equal to this, then question mark, whatever, if it's true, assign this value, the clicked value, to welcome label.text. Otherwise, else, colon, so assign the hello world value to welcome label.text. That's how this works in one line. And instead of doing like 9 lines of code, it does it in one. This is a much more efficient way, in my opinion, and it's nice and descriptive of what's happening. So welcome label.text equal to, if welcome label is equal to hello world, then use clicked, otherwise it's hello world. Now this is great if it's a single statement. If it's multiple statements in the if statement, this doesn't work. Okay, it doesn't work that way. So that's one way of doing it. And it's pretty simple what we've done. What we can also do is we can add in some comments. So // notice we get the sender and the E. We can say that this method changes the text property of the welcome label depending on its initial value. Okay. Pretty straightforward. A little bit of a comment I put in here, and I recommend you get used to using comments. Okay, save. Let's put this up on GitHub. Solution Explorer, right? I'm going to go to Team Explorer. I'm going to go to Changes. I'm going to notice I changed all these things. Hello World Form, Designer, and this other thing called Hello World Form.resx was added. Resource file, that's what that is. And I'm going to say that added label and button to the form, and we'll say which form is it? Hello World Form. Hello World Form. Okay, that's what we did. A label and a button. Commit all. Home. Sync. And push. And that should do everything that we want it to do. Okay. So questions around this? Any questions around, are we good? How about this? Are we good? Check mark for good, X for bad. Because, my friends, we're going to ramp pretty quickly. Please give me a check mark if you know what I've just done. Because we're going to, like I said, we're going to add more stuff to it and explain a few more things. So pretty straightforward stuff, I think. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that we want to be doing. Thank you for that response. It makes sense, right? So again, with 2 parts, design view, and this is in design time. We do this time. This is in the code view, or the code behind file. That's what this is called. Again, you can get that with F7. You go back here with Shift F7, right? You can run this. This is design time. This is run time. And run time, we see whatever we see, right? Whatever comes out. Nice? Great. Simple form. The first form, this is like your first, form that you've made. It's fantastic. All right. And lots of hidden tools you can use and stuff as well. Let's take a look at the Solution Explorer now. Okay, so we looked at the form, Hello World Form, and let's take a look and see what's happening in program. So program.cs is the start position, or the entry point to your entire application, right? And there's a couple of things that are different here in program.cs that we've never seen before. Okay, one of them is this application object, application enable visual styles, application set compatible text rendering default to false, and application.run. Notice that I'm making an anonymous form called hello world form. So this is actually when we're instantiating the form itself. So we create it here. So if I was to, I'm just going to double click this so we can keep this open. I create it by doing this. I design it, right? I make a new form or whatever. And then I code it here. And then I attach it here. So this is the first form that's being run. Application.run says I need you to attach a form, some kind of form that I'm going to put in here. And this has to be of type form. Hello world form is a form. It has an is a relationship with form. So it meets this criteria. And what I'm doing is I'm making a new form here, but it's an anonymous form, right? Which means that I could attempt to create a form up here. Now you're going to be forgiven to think that this would work. Let's just try it. So let's see. Here I want to make a new form. I want to call it my hello world form. So I'll say that, hey, hello world form. I want to make a new form, a data type called hello world form, right? Let's try this out. Hey, hello world form is there. And instead of doing this, I want to instantiate it up here. I want to say that, hey, it's equal to a new hello world form, right? And then as soon as I do that, and I take this out of this and put this down in here, because it's kind of the same, right? Hello world form. Let's see if this works. So I made an object, a data type, hello world form. This is the type, the class. I made a new object. I instantiated it, put it in here, just like it did. Let's run. And you're going to get an error. It's going to say, wah, sorry, don't know what you're talking about. In fact, it's going to say application set compatible text rendering default false. It says must be called before an object is created in the application. It tells you the error, right? Which means that we need to call this line first before we instantiate this line here. Okay? So I can break it up. Let's take this part. If I want to really do what I'm doing, I don't have to because it's already been done for me. I could do this and just leave this part here as a declaration. So again, step one, I could declare my form. I could do that, right? The form that I want. Let's say a form. Okay. Step two, instantiate it. Okay. And step three, in my application, I want to use this hello world form as the default form for my application. Pass a reference to the application. And specifically, if you notice, to the application.run method, right? So that's what this is. So now let's see if it works. Again, I'm messing with parts of the application just to show you that you have control, guys. Even though things have been written for you, you don't have to leave it this way, but you need to understand how things are put together. That's all, right? Let's leave this alone, okay? STA thread attribute. That's an attribute. It indicates, it says that the COM thread, communication thread model for an application is single-threaded, a single-threaded apartment. STA, single-threaded apartment. So this is a single-threaded application, not multi-threaded. Okay. So it's interesting that it puts that there. This part, does it have to be there? We'll talk about that another time. But more or less, that's what this means. Hello world form also is complaining because it's like, wait, what is it complaining about? It says put into using statement. So it says join declaration statement, which I had already. And then it says put into using statement, my hello world form. Okay. No. I mean, I could, if I did this, it would just basically do using. and you can see that that is not going to work. Okay, it's trying to figure out to help me out here. And in a using statement like this, what it does is it executes this form in a context, in this little context right here. But it's going to give me the same problem. It's going to say that you must provide an initializer in a fixed or using statement declaration. You must provide an initializer in a using declaration. So there is no initializer, and this is why this is the way it is. Here is an initializer, but it says that cannot you assign hello world form because it is a using variable, so I can't do it this way. So this is why this fails with the recommendation. So that just ignore it sometimes. Sometimes you just gotta ignore your suggestions because again it's trying to help you code and it doesn't know exactly everything, right? Same thing with up here. It's a static class. If I go up here, it'll say inconsistent modifier style, missing internal modifier, right? Don't do that. So just sometimes you have to ignore some things. That's all. Okay. So that's the way program works. So program basically runs first, right? It's the static method main is created. I can go with this or not, or I can create an anonymous form that I've put in here. What's the advantage of doing it this way? Well, in this case, my hello world form, because it's inside of a static main, it's a local variable called hello world form. Okay, it's not going to be available outside of my program.cs anyway. Okay, it's just not. If I want to make hello world form available outside of my my program.cs, then what I need to do is make it public and static actually, right? So then up in here, what I could do is I can move this part, this step 1, I can move this up here, and I could just say something like this is public static, okay? And then I'd have to make my class public and static because right now it's just static, okay? And if I was to do that, public static hello world form, then you can see that it would kind of work the same locally if I run it. Yeah, no changes there really at the end of the day. However, one great advantage of doing it this way is if we're going to change our application this way, is now I have access to hello world form through the program object itself. So for example, I don't know if I really wanted to do this right now, it doesn't make sense, but if in my code behind file I said, hey, you know what, I want to access that program itself, I can say program, right, dot, and you can see hello world form comes up, right? I can make a reference to hello world form, the actual instance of the hello world form, dot, and anything else that's available, welcome label, click me button, whatever's public, okay? So I may have to go there later on in this course, right? But for now, we don't really need it. But I'm leaving it like this for you so you understand that there's a lot of control you have. Sometimes we're afraid to touch something that someone else has written, but it's totally cool. We can totally do it. And it's not a big deal at all. All right? It's not going to like kill anything or destroy stuff. I will show you how you can really kill stuff in a second. Really, and you'll be like, oh man, what happened? I messed up. And by the way, even after I show you today, some of you will still come to me and say, Professor, I don't know what I did, but I broke my application and I don't know how to fix it. I'm going to show you how to do both. But I guarantee that somebody, one of you guys, is going to come to me, or girls, and say, I don't know what I did. I broke my application. Professor, can you help me? And then I'm going to say, go back to that first video on week 8 and go to the end. We're around 11:49 or 10 minutes to 12, right, as an example. Look in this section because I'm going to tell you how to fix it when it's broken. Here is how you can break it. Let's suppose you made a mistake and you didn't want to have this click me button here at all. And let's suppose, I don't know, you deleted it like this. Okay, delete. Like this, okay? And then you want to go to your window, your hello world form suddenly to design stuff. And you're going to get this. Oh man, you're going to say to yourself, oh, what did I do? I don't know how to fix this problem. And it says the error is going to say, hello world form does not contain a definition for click me button click, and no accessible extension method click me button click accepting a first argument of type blah 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 can be found. And you're going to be like, but why? I don't understand. And it's going to point you to this place that says hello world form designer line 59. Let's go there. Hello world form. So I'm going to go to my Solution Explorer, and it's going to go to hello world form designer line 59. And you see this thing here, right? Well, of course it's not going to work, because what's happened is we've made an event handler, and the event handler is supposed to be called click me button click. Guess what, though? It doesn't exist because we've just deleted it. So that's why we're getting this error, and it's a red underlined error. It's in another file, right? It's in the partial portion of my file that says, hey, I want an event handler. The event handler is going to be click me button click, but wait, it doesn't exist. Error. So to fix this problem, two ways. Comment this out for now, which will fix your problem. So you can actually go back and code away, right? Or a better way, undo that. Go back to your hello world form and put it back. Okay? Put this back. If you want to not have an event happen for an object, all right, then in my designer, on the design side, click on the click me button. Okay? Go to your Solution Explorer. Okay? Sorry, go to your properties. All right, here's my properties. And if you notice on the click me button, there are a bunch of controls up here. One of them is this little lightning bolt. This little lightning bolt control, if you click onto it, it'll show you that click me button click corresponds to the, this is the method name, corresponds to the click event. These are different events you can run, all these ones. Click me button click is the one that corresponds to it. I'm creating a connection between the click event when I click on the button and a method that's named click me button click. If I don't want to do this, if I don't want a connection, I just need to delete this part right here after the lightning bolt, and I click away. Now if I run this thing, it doesn't matter even if that thing exists. The connection for me to make an event happen will not work anymore. There is no connection anymore between the code behind file and this button's click event. It's ignoring the click event now. I can click this as much as I want, right? It doesn't matter. And let's take a look and see what it's done on the CS side. So even though this thing is there, look, there actually is an event. It's grayed out. It's not in use. And in the design side, on the designer, you can see now that whatever was there, it's gone. There is no event anymore. It's been removed from here, right? So that is how you fix it, and that's what causes the problem. The problem is when I make an event and I make it by accident. Let's say, here, let's make an accidental event. I'm going to go to the designer, and by accident, I'm going to double click my form like this. It's going to make a new event in the form called hello world form load. That is the default event for the form. When the form loads, then I want to do something. Oh man, I don't want this, and I go in here and delete it. That's dumb. If I did this, and if I delete it, and if I go back to the form, it's going to be, wah, I'm sorry, but you have a problem, and your form is broken now, right? And it even tells you, go to the code over here, and it'll take you to the code where the problem is, right here. And you're going to be like, oh my God, what do I do? Well, there's two things you can do. Delete this line, comment it out, right here, or go back to the, that thing you destroyed, which is in here, undo it, put it back, right? Which is the right thing to do. Put it back, save your form, go back to hello world form, and disconnect it. Go here to this, and click on the little lightning bolts, go down to the load event, and remove this reference. Just go like this, remove the reference. And once you've removed the reference, now take a look. If I go back to this, it's grayed out, and now I can safely remove it. Okay? That's the way to do it properly. Okay? So you're going to ask me how to do this, and I'm going to tell you, go back 10 minutes to 12 Wheatgate's video and take a look there, because that is where you need to do the fixing. You're gonna break your form. It's gonna happen to you at some point, and you're gonna go, wait, what did Tom say again? How do I do that? Because it's looking for something, guys. Remember, it's a partial file. Partial files means there's two parts to it. One part you're looking at, one part you're not, potentially. And that part you're not looking at is the hello world form.designer.cs, this part. And this is what it programmatically does. When I drag and drop or double click, programmatically, Windows Forms, it creates some code for you. It's a visual coding style, right? Some people don't like it because they don't know what's happening in the background, right? You can control what's happening here, okay? I'm just telling you, this is what it does programmatically, okay? So I want to reconnect my Click Me button now. What about if I did that? If I disconnected it by default and I want to reconnect it? A couple ways I could do that. I could programmatically go back in here and put my stuff back, or, if you know the code, or I can go to my Hello World Form Designer, click on my Click Me button once. If I was to double click, that may not give me the result I want. But I can go to my click event, I can go here, and I can pull down an existing event, any method that I have here that qualifies, that has a sender and an argument. Okay? The event args. If I click on this now it's wired again. It's connected, right? And if I go to my Hello World Form Designer, I'll prove it to you, right? Look, here is the new event handler again. And the event handler works like this. Whatever the name of the control or the form is, dot, the name of the event, plus equals, like we're adding a new event, a new system.event handler that takes the name of the method as a callback, whatever the method is that's going to be the event handler. This part is the event listener. It's saying, I want to listen for the click event, right? This part here is the event handler. It's going to handle the event, and it's going to point to the method that's going to handle the event, in this case the click event. Okay, that's what it does. This means I can rename the method, or I can reuse the method in a bunch of events altogether, which we'll talk about later on in this course. Okay, so that's how it works. And now if I run this thing, it should work just as before. Okay, so that covers a lot of what we want to talk about today, right? Which is, again, we covered, just to go over it again, we covered basic forms and controls. By the way, if you want to shift this back from events to properties, click on this button. Takes you back. These things shift you from events. The event is the lightning bolt. Property is this little button right here. Changes. There's a lot of things to remember. And in a test situation, for example, in an end of semester test, I may ask you to make some kind of form within a couple of days, which means you have to know how to do this pretty quickly. Okay. All right, so again, this is pretty cool. So I've got this little form here, and you know what? We've kind of put everything up on GitHub. I've turned everything back to where it was. So if I go back to Team Explorer, and if I go to Home, and I go to Changes, you're going to see that even though we haven't really modified much, the one thing that changed was our program.cs file. Remember, we went and did all those changes in our program.cs file. We made the Hello World form a public static. We changed the Hello World form itself to public and static, the program, I mean. We did all that kind of stuff. So that's what happened here in program. And then Hello World form.cs, we modified some stuff too. Hello World form.cs. We added this Click Me event, and the Click Me event allows you to click onto it and click off of it. So let's add that in. We'll say modified the program .cs file to create a named form, which is what we did. The other one was a anonymous form we had in there, right? I'm going to go commit all, home, sync, and push. And now it's up on GitHub for you guys. You're going to need to know how to use GitHub in your tests. I'm showing you this again and again to get you guys used to it. You should be practicing it so you're feeling more comfortable with it. Program.cs. There's program.cs, right? You can see this is how it's done. And let's just go back to the PowerPoint to make sure that we're well on our way to understanding how all this works. We did labels. We haven't really done text boxes. We did a button and we did labels. There's some messed up stuff happening right here, but anyways. So we did that pretty much today. We talked about what a form is. They get some examples here on how to do that. Text boxes, labels are kind of an output. Text boxes are kind of an input. So let's do a text box really quickly. Okay. So if I go to do text box, and again, I'm going to bring up my my form itself. So I go back to the form, just like we did when we did a label, right? We can go to the toolbox, and we can select a text box. A text box is an input. It's like an edit text. That's what it's like, okay? So I'm going to take this text box and pull it in, right? And the text box itself will give us an input. Again, a really important thing when it comes to dragging a control into the form. Remember what's happening. When I drag a control in programmatically in my Hello World form designer, which is the hidden form typically that we don't normally use, this Hello World form designer, it just created a bunch of code for me just to put this in here, right? By default, this ugly name for this text box is probably text box 1. Let's take a look at that. So if I click onto text box 1, and if I scroll all the way up, you can see that text box 1 is the default name, right? And it has some default values. Let's change the text box 1 name to something like name text box, right? Name text box. And let's do some spacing here, right? Let's make sure that the text box takes in 20 points. So just like before, we go to font. We're going to go to size. We're going to change the text box size to 20. Notice by default also that the text box size can be resized to whatever size you want. All right, so there's my text box size. Okay. And I want to take in a name, right? Whatever the name is up here, like maybe some kind of directions, like enter your name. Okay, as an example. Cool. So now I already have a label with a certain style, this label. I can control drag from my label. If I control drag from my label, I make a copy of it over here. Okay, control drag. I can control drag, right? And I can make multiple copies of my stuff. Really easy. So why would I want that? Let me just delete these. Why would I want that? Because it keeps the visual style of my label automatically for me. I don't have to do a lot of work in terms of visuals, right? The one thing it does is it changes it back to a default name. Instead of hello world, it's now label. You can only have one control with the same name. Welcome label. Remember, it's a variable, right? So what is this going to represent? Well, this is going to be like enter name, right? So that's what it should say under the text. It should say something like, you know, enter your name. Okay. Enter your name should be centered. So remember, we want to center this, even if it's something like this. We want to center this with the other stuff, and we want to center this with the other stuff, right? So remember how it works. The last thing I click gets centered. So if I click this one, and this one, hello world, and if I click this, then these two get centered with this one, undo. I want to do it the other way around. I want this is the visual style that I want, and I want this one and this one to be centered along with hello world. And now you can see that it's centered, right? Enter your name. If I don't like centering, I can always left align it or whatever. For now, let's just use centering. So enter your name here. This is the place where it's going to be entered. Let's make it so that it is the same size. So I'll make it so that the text box is the same size as the label, right? So kind of whatever the label is, there's the text box. Again, I can do the same thing with the centering trick. So again, this is what I want to center. This one and this one are the two options that I want to center. Click on this one here, and then they all get centered inside the form control. Okay. So then So then, once I've got this in there, I want to take input here. So this here is my label. I can't have that as label. Let's change that to something that I want. For example, this will be the name label. We'll call it name label. And if you want to get more steering directions, it should be enter your first name. Let's just put name label for now. Later on, in another lesson, we'll do more details. Name label. Okay, this one should be your name text box. All right, so now we have friendly names that we can remember, and so when we code them, right, when we code them, then we can do something in here. Okay. So what I want to do is I enter my name and I want to capture it somehow. So inside the program.cs file now, right, I want to close off the hello world.cs, this the design part, the code part. I still have this, right, which is my my click me button text. This is okay for the click me button, but it'd be nice if when I click my click me button, that says something like something something hello world, right? My name, hello world, right? The problem with this is that this won't work anymore, right? Because what if I type a different name and then I have to kind of look at it, whatever, right? Not this way anyway, right? I have to have the same pattern, if you will, right? So I want to kind of do the same thing. I want to say that the name of the person, so whatever the name is, so example would be something like if the welcome label.text is equal to, right? Remember how we did this? So I want to have, $, curly brace, and then I want to say something like the name, so name label, sorry, name text box dot text, right? Whatever the name text box dot text is. And remember how we did this? Is it $sign that we use, right? A localization string, right? How do we get to that string? Does anyone remember how to do that? Sign outside? Sure, we can do that. So there we do. So we said, okay, if name text box dot text, if it's equal to this, now remember that it says localization interpolation string 0 hello world, and it gives me like this, represents a text as always. Okay, just letting you know. Okay, so name text box dot text. Well, if welcome label is equal to this, whatever it is, then say clicked, right? Otherwise, let's interpolate that as well. Let's make this thing equal to this thing. Okay, now I want to show you this because it's going to present an issue. So I'm getting the name text box dot text and I'm interpolating it here. Will this work and how will it work? Okay, so let's just do that. Again, there's some tricks to this. I'm trying to do it with one line and not multiple lines. I enter my name, right, and click me, Tom hello. Okay, it does that, and I click back, click. This worked because it did it, but the problem with it is that my Tom hello world is too long. And why? Because in my design view, I designed my form to make it only as big as hello world, and it's not auto-sizing. So if I want to take a longer text, then this is where I want to do that trick that I did before, which is make this thing as long as I can, right? And invisibly to the user. The user won't know that it's this long, right? And then if I did this, again, limitations to this. If I said Tom, and then press and click me, and I can say Tom hello world, and if I click it again, back to clicked, Tom hello world, it works. Maybe I want to say hello world Tom, right? Which makes more sense, right, than Tom hello world. So this totally can work. So hello world. Instead of hello world, we want to say hello Tom. Right? Hello Tom. That's what you want to say that. That's a little bit better. It's a welcome, right? And we'll do the same thing. We'll move this part. Make sure that the pattern is the same that we're checking. Okay? So hello Tom. Make sure that the exclamation, it has to be exactly the same, guys, the one we're checking. This is the limitations of doing something like this. So hello Tom, otherwise it's going to say clicked, and it can put anything in there. Let's try that again. We'll end it with this one now. So Tom, it says hello world, click me, it says hello Tom, and then it'll go back to clicked and hello Tom every single time. So it'll only show hello world once. What if I change this one to something else? Let's say Mike. So hello Mike, it's going to go back. You know, Darren, hello Darren. Lisa, hello Lisa. Right? Doesn't matter what you put in there, it's going to work, right? So that's how it works. So basically, we did the same thing. Name text box is the name of the variable, text is the property. We're going to take the value from there and interpolate it right inside the string. We can do all the same tricks we know how to do from C# right in here in Windows Forms. Okay? And that's how we were able to accomplish that. So that is a text box. All right? So text box is not like a text box in Word. Text box is a, like Word, Microsoft Word. Text box is an edit text. It's something that allows us to edit or enter text inside of a form. Okay? That's what it does. And here in the PowerPoint, it talks about how to do a lot of the stuff that we talked about, how to create stuff that's pretty quick and stuff here. We can do a lot of different things. It also talks about a lot of properties here that I haven't talked about. This is for your reading pleasure. So please go through here. For example, the accept button. It gets and sets the button on the form that is clicked when the user presses the enter key, and so on. Like there might be a default button. So this is interesting because sometimes we want to use a mouse, sometimes we just want to press enter. Right now we don't have that functionality for Click Me. So if I went to Solution Explorer and I picked up the properties form and I clicked on the Click Me button, if I went on the form itself and on the accept button, where it says accept button, right now it's not set to anything, but I can select a button that's existing on the form, the Click Me button. And now when I press enter, it'll do the same thing as me clicking. So if I press this, run, and then if I go to the form, and if I don't have a value, it'll just say hello, comma, right? Or I can just put a value in here and press enter, and then it'll just say whatever I want in there. So I can redo that value, right, and press enter, and it'll do whatever, just like me clicking the button, which is kind of cool. So that's what that does. It talks about sizing and whether it's visible or not. You can make controls visible or invisible if you like. That's totally fine. And it talks about how to drag controls in here and the anatomy of all this stuff in a lot of detail. All right, so this is kind of something that you want to read, go through it. How to add a button to the form. We talked about labels and text boxes. We talked about that. And it pretty much talks about everything we've done up to this point. Okay. One thing we didn't talk about is tab index, what that means, right? Because sometimes what happens is if I press a tab, I want to use like just my keyboard and not a mouse, and I want to go from here to the button. Right now, the tab index on each control, which means where it starts, they're the same. So if you look at tab index is 2. That doesn't make sense. I want to start here. Right, so I can say that the tab index for this one, as an example, is 1. I can make this tab index 2, right? So 1 and 2, and I can ignore these ones, 0 and 0. These ones are going to be ignored because they're labels, right? So if I did that now, then if I go to run the form itself, if I press tab, I can focus between this control and the Click Me button. Right, see that it does that, and it starts off here. Okay, so that's kind of what tab index does. It talks about that a little bit. Formatting data, everything that comes from a form, like we talked about before, everything that comes from a user input is string values. If you want to convert a form from a form data from into a number, we have to convert it into a number like we've done before. Everything that comes from a form is strings. Just keep that in mind. Okay, and it talks about naming controls, which we all did that already. and we can how to correct errors. We talked about this issue that we would have, okay, with the whole event and how what happens if you delete by the event by accident. Okay, so that is everything that we wanted to talk about. Any questions about form controls, the basics? We talked about some very simple user interfaces, and guys, like I said to you guys, the rest of the semester we're going to be using forms. We're not going to be doing console applications anymore. It's going to be more visual for us, but it's going to add a layer of complexity to some of the things we're doing. So please make sure that you practice doing some stuff here. Any questions? All right, as a reminder, so starting on Wednesday when we meet, right, I'll go through the details of your midterm test. That's coming Wednesday, right? And I'll also, if you need any questions answered about your assignment, please make sure to get it to me, because the assignment and the midterm test are super related. They're very similar in terms of what I'm asking you to do. So if you don't know how to do your assignment, your midterm test, ooh, you're going to have challenges, right? So make sure you know what you're doing in your assignment, please. It's important, okay? Guys, thank you so much. I'm going to stick around. I'm going to stop recording now. I'm going to wait around for some questions after I stop recording. So let me stop recording the stream now.